Hi everyone, so I decided to do this video on, there's a series that I had seen constantly on BookTube that was talked about. And since I finished off the last book in that series, I wanted to discuss the whole series and why I think it's overrated, you know. And then I wanted to also discuss a series that is definitely underrated. I don't hear a lot of people talking about, and I actually like that series more than the other series. So I wanted to talk about this series here, which is the Victorian Rebels. Now, I only have 2 physical books. I had the whole series, but I don't like the whole series. I only kept these 2 because these are the ones I like the most. So this one here is the first book in the series. So a lot of people talk about the Highwaymen. Now this one here is this man, what's his name again? Dorian Blackwell. He's essentially like, he has kind of like crawled his way up from the muck, from being in the streets. And now he's essentially this very powerful man. And so he sees Farah, and she is a widow. Now you end up learning different secrets in here, about, like, you know, different histories and all this stuff of these characters. I really enjoyed this one, but I will say that this series here is very dark in tone, because you got all of these characters that you are introduced, and they all end up forming like this brotherhood in a sense, because they all were in Newgate Prison as young men. Like, the eldest was like 18, and all the rest of them were like 17 and younger. So you're talking about kids that were in Newgate Prison with adults, and the horrors of what they seen and were a part of, you don't want to imagine, you know? Like, it kind of very much reminds me of, if anybody, I've never read the book, but I want to read the book. If anybody's ever seen the movie The Count of Monte Cristo, and you see like his life in that, in the prison that he was in. I don't know if it was Newgate or if it was something else. I can't remember. I have to go and look back at like which prison he was in, but it was a very like notorious prison of like, you don't want to be there. The things that happened in prisons years ago were the stuff of nightmares. So just imagine like young men or boys being put into these prisons, and the disgusting things that happen to these young individuals. It's just, I don't want to imagine. So, like I said, this here's like the starting of this book series, and even though I did like it, it is darker in tone, and I don't always like dark stuff. I don't always like reading darker toned romance novels, especially when it comes to, it has to be talks of like children, because that's my trigger right there. Kids. And hearing of like different things that happened to kids back in the day, their treatment, especially like laws that had to be put into place because you would go and take this child and have them work a job that was extremely dangerous and could kill, besides killing them, it also had these health effects to these children. These children did not live long lives because they're being exposed to like asbestos and all kinds of like horrible shit. So that's why these laws had to be put into place to where you're like, no, we're not putting children to work into this stuff here. So to me, it's like, I did like the story, but it's very sad. So this one here was essentially like the starting of the series. You get to know different characters, and I did like this one. But then when I moved on to the second one in the series, which I don't have anymore, but I'll put it right here. So this one here was The Hunter. And here's another one where he was a part of Newgate Prison. He was one of the prisoners. And he has, obviously done well for himself. Now he's like more of a, that's why it's called the hunter. He's essentially a hitman, where he gets assigned this woman that he's supposed to kill. And he goes to her and ends up falling for her. Now, I ended up DNFing this book because I was bored. Now, I may end up going back to this book and like listening to it, and I might be able to get through it like through audio. Sometimes I can get through a book better with an audiobook than I can to try to read it. So this one here, I might end up going back to it to read it, just to try to get through it. But this one, that's what it had to do with him falling in love with his target. So the third book in the series was The Highlander. I ended up getting through that one, and I honestly do not remember anything of this book. All I know is that I gave it a 3. So it's, can the fiercest master of battle conquer a woman's heart? They call him the Demon Hunter, the fearsome Lieutenant Colonel Liam Mackenzie is known for his superhuman strength, towering presence, and fiery passion in the heat of battle. I think I kind of remember this one. I wasn't really a fan of him. I thought he was rather mean through most of the book. So I ended up giving it a 3. I did manage to finish it, but I wasn't really impressed with it. So that was the third book in that series. The fourth book in the series, The Duke, I DNF'd that because the guy was a total asshole. I have a hard time with certain heroes where if the guy is a complete piece of shit asshole, why would I want to root for him to have the heroine? This guy's not a good guy. I don't care if it's like he changed and all that stuff. I don't care. First impressions for me are always the most important. And if this person, like, his first impression was like treating this woman like total trash, it's kind of hard for me to root for the guy. So this one here, the beginning of the book starts off with the heroine, which I don't remember her name. What was her name again? Because his name was Colin, but he went by Cole. He was a duke. Imogen. That's her name, Imogen. Now, Imogen was working as a barmaid as like an extra thing. She actually was like a nurse at a hospital. But she was doing extra hours as a barmaid because her father owed like this debt. And so she didn't want her father to get harmed. So she decided to try to work off her father's debt by working as a barmaid. Well, the guy who owns the bar is a major piece of shit. And so the Duke shows up there, and she ends up sitting on the Duke's lap because he kind of like pushes her to get on his lap. So she sits there and she doesn't know how to. She's like, I don't know, how do I handle this? She's in a way, like, she's attracted to the guy, but she's also a little scared. Like, she doesn't want him to, like, touch her in inappropriate spots. So eventually he goes and he leaves the room. And the guy who owns the bar is like, hey, you owe me, girl. You need to go and sleep with this Duke because, your father owes me all this money. And he basically, I think he threatened her like younger sister, saying, oh, well, she can go and work for me. She can work on her back. And I'm just like, hell no. So that to me was like, oh, great. Now this woman's first time is not going to be a great experience, which does happen in history. So she now has to have sex with the Duke. He is half-ass drunk. Has sex with her, doesn't realize she's a virgin. And she doesn't tell him. So her first experience is not a good time. Then she goes and sees him, I think it's maybe like years later or months later. Might be a year later. that he was assumed dead. He comes back and he has like, people are saying that he has typhoid. And she doesn't believe he has typhoid because now she's nursing him back to health. And so no one wants to be around him because he's got typhoid. So typhoid is very allergic, you know, not allergic, but contagious. It's very contagious. This is why you never want to go and have like a whole overrun of like rats in your city, because rats can give you typhoid, and you can have a whole swath of people dying of typhoid before you realize it's the rats that got infested. This is why you try to take care of infestations and all that stuff in your cities, because rats can give you typhoid. So, he got diagnosed with typhoid, and so she's trying to nurse him back to health because she had gotten typhoid and she managed to survive it. So she's basically immune to it. So she's trying to nurse this guy back to health, and he keeps calling, like, I don't think it was her name. I think it was a different name she gave him. Was it Ginny? Something like that. She gave him like a nickname instead of her name. And so she's trying to nurse him back to health, and he goes and he keeps calling her name. And I'm like, why would you be like into this chick when you barely knew her? I don't know. And then like he ends up having like where he doesn't remember her because he ended up getting like tortured and had like some kind of like, lost his memory. And to me, I was like, I am not feeling this guy. This guy's a complete asshole. I really don't care if this guy dies because this guy's a jerk. So she ends up nursing him back to health. And that's kind of like where I kind of ended it, where I was like, I don't want to read anymore. I'm just not feeling this guy. I was even listening to it on audiobook, and I was like, I am not feeling this dude. This dude is a complete a-hole. So I was like, no. And so I moved on to the next book in this series, which was The Scot Beds His Wife. And this one here kind of bored me. I will say I felt sorry for the character, where he's a Scot. So this is like, there was like 2 Scots, I think. And there was some Irishmen in this series too. So this one here is, he goes by Gavin St. James. Now, that's not originally his name. His last name was like something else. I think it was like Mackenzie or something like that. And his father's a real piece of turd, you know. He's a huge pile of donkey shit. And so that guy ends up, he was beating his wife and he would beat the son. So the son managed to get away from, his home. And he basically grew up kind of like, on the streets and stuff. He got taken in and everything. Was being taken care of a little bit by someone else. And so he is the Earl of Thorn, but he doesn't want to have his title. He doesn't give a crap about it because it's through his family, his father, and he doesn't want to have his father's name. And so he ends up meeting the heroine, and to me, I was like, I wasn't really feeling it. And so I ended up DNFing that book as well. And I'm like, man, I'm not having a good time with this series at all if I end up DNFing all of these, The first book in that series was the only one that I really enjoyed. So I was like, damn, I'm not feeling this series at all. So I ended up delving into the novella. There was a novella in here that was The Earl on the Train. Now, I read that in one of my books where it's like Big Duke energy. I didn't realize that it was like basically kind of like the continuation of like, that was kind of like the ending of that series was with the characters that were in The Earl on the Train. And The Earl on the Train kind of like reintroduced you to these 2 characters that were in this book. They introduced you into the Duke with the dragon tattoo. So I ended up reading The Earl on the Train, and I really enjoyed that one. So I was like, well, let me delve into the last book of the series since that's the one I have. So I ended up delving into this one here, the Duke with the dragon tattoo. And I have to say that I did like this one a lot more than the other books. I still like this one here, so these two are probably my favorites of the series. This one I felt so bad for because you've got the character where he was a boy, end up being discovered at like 18, in a ditch with, it was like a mass grave. And he had like burns of like from the lye, because obviously with a mass grave, you want the bodies to like disintegrate, you know, and break down and things like that. Either that or feed bodies to a pig farm. If you if you know of pig farms, you know they can go through a body like butter. You know, if you ever watched the movie there, Snatch, that's the one guy says, you know, all you got to do is remove the hair and the teeth, so that way it's better for the piggy's digestion. So that's a lot that I didn't need to know in that movie, but watch the movie. It's a good movie. So back in the day, you know, obviously people were not treated with any kind of dignity during death, that they would go and just throw people in mass graves and just, you know, try to disintegrate them. So he was found on, you know, near the road, and Lorelei, that's her name, right? Lorelei was 14 when she saw him. Now he was 18, she was 14. So this 14-year-old young lady decides to, you know, tell her family, like, no, we need to try to save him, you know. So she ends up nursing him back to health. It's another amnesia trope where he doesn't remember who he is. All he knows is that he's got like this dragon tattoo on like the back of his body. And so he ends up falling for Lorelei. Now, of course, she's too young at that time, you know, because he's 18. He knows that he's older than her, but he doesn't know how old he is, besides him not remembering, like, his name or, you know, how he came to be, you know, in that mass grave. All he knows is that, you know, he obviously had not had a good time. And so he ends up, you know, they fall for each other, but now he has to go off and kind of like do his own thing. And he was going to come back for her, you know, obviously when she reached a certain age and all that stuff, you know. And so her brother, Mortimer, is a massive piece of donkey shit. This guy, not only did he injure her years ago, where she had did something, I think she stepped on his shoe, or she had accidentally stepped on his cane, or something trivial, to where he got back at her by injuring her ankle. He broke her ankle. Her ankle did not heal properly because it obviously needed to be set back in place, and it wasn't. So now she walked around for 20 some freaking years with this, you know, with her gait, you know, not being straight. You know, she limped. She had a limp. And, you know, it would cause her pain. Her father, very much out to lunch with that, you know. Didn't seem like a terrible man, but he obviously was out to lunch with the way his son treated, you know, his daughter. So Mortimer, the piece of shit that he is, ended up shanghaiing who she called Ash. Now, he ends up being on a ship for like 20 years. The first 15 of that was him being a slave. And then the rest was like him trying to figure out a way to come back to her. Once she found out that there was a possibility she was going to get married off to some man that she didn't want to get married off to, he came back. He came back and essentially kidnapped her and kidnapped her friend. And her friend was in, the Earl on the Train. And so this one here, I felt so bad for Ash, because not knowing how many years, what his family name is, all that stuff, the treatment that he went through, not only dealing with like his, having that aversion to touch, and all that stuff. That really kind of like got to me, not wanting to be touched, only allowing like certain individuals to touch him, and all that stuff. And then all the stuff that he went through and having nightmares and all this stuff. This man crawled through shit, to get to the other side, went through so much stuff to get to the other side. Finally started making a name for himself. And so he called himself the Rook, on his ship. And so, it was essentially him learning to, get her to like love him, without like making demands and all that stuff. So that was basically their story. But I did like it. I thought it was good, but I felt really bad for him because he went through a whole bunch of stuff just to get back to her. And then there was other things that he kind of like had memories of. He finally like had his memory come back to him, but he had different stuff that he was remembering. So that was the end of that series right there. You see that? So, but the Earl on the Train was the finishing off of, because you had two characters in here that were introduced. And so you have a hero in the Earl on the Train that basically got like his second chance. So I'm not going to say like, who it is in case you haven't read the series yet. But that series, I'd have to say, I feel like it was overrated on BookTube. I don't feel like it is worth the hype that everybody gave it. It definitely was darker in tone. It definitely was more depressing to me, to where I find this series, the Good Girl series, to be a better series. Whether or not people think it's silly or not as good or whatever it is, I don't care. But for me, I enjoyed myself a lot more in these books than I did in those ones. So this one here, we're kind of reintroduced to Sir Carlton Morley. Now, you know of him in the previous series, but I'd say if you don't want to delve into the Victorian Rebel series, you'd be fine with getting into this one here, because Sir Carlton Morley, you get a little bit of his backstory of what happened to him when he was younger. And also, there's a couple of characters in here that were in that one, but it's okay to kind of like delve into this like blind, because that's essentially what I did. Like, I ended up reading The Highwayman, but I didn't read the rest of the series. So I ended up delving into this series instead, and I liked this one a lot more. So Sir Carlton Morley is essentially like, I'd say he's a policeman, but on the off hours, he's essentially a man who kills off bad guys, So kind of reminds me a bit of like Dexter, where that show Dexter was he obviously was like a blood spatter analysis and all that stuff. So he worked with the police, but on his off hours, he was a serial killer, that killed other serial killers. So, in a sense, this guy's kind of like the same thing. Or like what you'd say maybe would be, maybe like a Dirty Harry or something, So like this person on his off hours tries to find these people, that do bad things and, essentially bring them to justice, or his justice, So I think my sister is messaging me. My sister messages me on Facebook and it drives me nuts. So this one here I liked. So you had like him looking for somebody in, or investigating this case where he was essentially in this, like, it was something like for ladies to go to and have like prostitutes, you know, satisfy them sexually and all that stuff. It was male prostitutes. So he gets mistaken for a male prostitute by, what's her name? Yeah, Prudence. Now, Prudence is in a situation where she is engaged to be married, but the man she's engaged to be married with supposedly has how many biblos, has how many children from mistresses. And she's like, well, I don't want to go into, you know, I don't want to go into my marriage and and not know about true pleasure. So, and also the guy who he like, or the girl, the woman he like was having an affair with was like her friend. And it's like, oh, come on. So she's like, I want to go and at least have pleasure once and know what pleasure is like from somebody who obviously knows how to please women. So she goes there and mistakes Carlton Morley for a male prostitute. So one thing leads to another, they have sex, and then the next time he sees her is over her fiance's dead body. Now she gets accused of murdering her fiance at the altar. She says she didn't do it. She found him that way. She pulled out the knife, you know, or he tried to pull out the knife and she tried to like put it back in, because she was like, well, if he pulls it out, he's going to bleed out and all that stuff. So she obviously knew enough about anatomy and all that stuff. And so she, you know, gets accused of it, but also she lets Sir Carlton Morley know, like, hey, I can't go to jail in my condition. And he's like, well, what condition's that? And she's like, well, I'm pregnant and you're the father. So it's essentially like, you know, a baby trope. If you're not into the baby trope, you may not like it. But I liked it because he was like, well, she's having my child. I need to marry her. And also, you know, the fact that he was like, he needed to investigate her to see if she actually, you know, killed her fiance. He, in a sense, believed her, but with the way he grew up, where he was like, people lie, you know, so he didn't want to go and take her word for it. So he was a bit of a butthole a little bit sometimes. He was a bit of a butthole, but I still enjoyed the book a lot, to where I ended up giving it 4 stars. So that one there was the starting of the series and introduced the good sisters to the story. So this one here, you could totally read as a standalone. You don't have to read this in order of how the book is. So we got this woman who, yeah, Vanessa Latimer. Vanessa goes to this, I guess you'd say it's like a bed and breakfast kind of thing. And one of the rooms that she ends up getting assigned to room in is haunted by a ghost. So she ends up seeing this ghost. And so the ghost is essentially trying to find out why he was dead and, you know, different things like that. So it was a really sweet historical romance novella, and I really enjoyed it. It was really cute. It's like a nice Christmassy novella you can read at Christmas time, you know, and all that stuff. It was really sweet. I really enjoyed this one a lot, and it's something where it's like I want to go and reread it again and again, like at Christmas time, because it was just really cute. I really enjoyed it. But like I said, you don't have to read it in order of the series. You can totally read this as a standalone, you know. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one of like this ghost and trying to find out like why he died and, you know, all this different stuff. And, you know, there's things that happen at the end that, you know, I was like, you know, it's outside of reality, but it was really sweet. I like it. And it's like, it's fiction. So, I mean, you know, I can kind of like, you know, go outside of, you know, all of that. So the next one in the series I really liked was, this one here had Honoria. So Honoria is her, like, I believe it's Prue's older sister. I think it was her older sister. And Honoria had gotten married to this man who was a complete piece of garbage. And so he ended up getting killed in the series. And so she was a widow. Well, she ended up getting injured in the previous book. And so she ends up getting helped by the doctor in here, Dr. Titus Conleaf. I think it's Conleaf. And they have a history. Now, when they were younger, this reminds me very much of, like, again, The Magic by Lisa Kleypas. Now, when they were younger, Titus had worked for her father. And so she ended up getting sick. I dropped a book. She ended up getting sick. I hate it when I have no room here. She ended up getting sick with, like, typhoid, I believe. And Titus stayed. And a doctor had come, and they essentially brought her back to health. So she survived because of Titus, you know, helping her. Now that kind of like set him on the path of like wanting to be a doctor. And I was like, that was so nice. I liked seeing that the doctor was like, hey, you help me, I will go and give you an apprenticeship, you know, and you can learn how to become a doctor. And I was like, that was so nice. I really liked that, you know, this man, like, taking a liking to this young boy, you know, and wanting to see him better his life, you know. It was really nice. And so Titus and her ended up getting separated by her piece of crap father. And years later, go down the line, he you know, he sees that she's injured, so he brings her back to health and everything. And it was really sweet. It was like them getting to know each other again and like reestablishing their love, you know, that second chance. And it was a really sweet story. And I liked, like, kind of like he had this like hospital that he like owned. And so like him like treating her and like her helping him out in the hospital. It was just, I really enjoyed that one. It was just really sweet. So the next book in the series that I really enjoyed was, this is Dancing with Danger. Now, this is Mercy. Mercy's definitely the character where she's more out there. Like, she definitely wants to have more of an adventure. She wants to go and, you know, she doesn't want to be tied down with a marriage. So she ends up befriending and getting involved with Raphael. I think that's what his name is. Yeah, Raphael. He is a smuggler. He's kind of worked himself up from, like, the muck, you know. But he does some underhanded, illegal things. But, you know, he's trying to turn a new leaf, be a better man kind of thing. So him and his brother are like trying to get out from under, you know, the situation that they're in. And so he ends up meeting Mercy. So it's like kind of like they're back and forth and everything. There's a little bit of investigation going on in here. And I liked that too. But it's like you could see like their attraction to each other and like him trying to hold off and everything. But I really enjoyed this one. This was a really interesting storyline. And then you go on to the next book in the series, which this one here is Tempting Fate. Now, this one here, what's her name again? Felicity? Was it Felicity? Yeah, Felicity. Felicity is more of the shy sister. And she is very awkward in social situations. And she doesn't know how to, like, attract a husband and things like that. She's not sure if she even wants to. She's very soft, you know, like, likes to take care of different things. You know, definitely has that, like, wants to take care of people heart. And then you have Gabriel. Now, Gabriel, him and his brother kind of grew up in a terrible situation where Gabriel was the one who kind of was the one to try to defend his brother and protect his brother Raphael. And Gabriel ended up getting ended up getting disfigured because he was thrown into like fights with dogs, pit bulls. This is where pit bulls end up getting like a terrible name. Like the pit bulls I've been around growing up, because my grandmother had 2 pit bulls and she raised them since they were puppies. Now, yeah, could they get aggressive? For sure. Any dog can get aggressive, you know. If you train them that way, they will be. But pit bulls get a very bad name because they get thrown in like fighting pits and things like that, not treated very well. So for me, I feel bad for the dogs because the dogs were taught to be that way. If you teach a dog to be vicious, it will be vicious. It's the same thing with a human. If you teach a human to be vicious, they will be vicious, you know, unless they learn differently. So for me, I felt bad for Gabriel because he was raised in that situation, and his face got disfigured. Now Titus in the previous book ended up helping Gabriel and ended up giving him essentially a new face, what I'd say would be early plastic surgery. And so I really liked this because Gabriel got a little more confident to where he can go and like try to like give his, essentially try to seduce Felicity because he was attracted to her. And also he was protecting her because she had like this, what's the term I want to use? She had this like hit on her, like somebody wanted to kill her. So he was essentially her bodyguard. So it was like a bodyguard romance, and then them getting to know each other and him like speaking to her and all that stuff. It was really sweet. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And it was like, you could like tell like this person definitely needed, that love. And you know what? It kind of reminded me a little bit of Seduce Me at Sunrise by Lisa Kleypas? Might be very similar, but not the same. Very similar though, where it's like a tortured character and, not thinking he's good enough for the heroine. So that one there I really enjoyed. I need to pick up my last book. Okay, so last book in the series so far, there's 2 other books coming out. I think one of the books coming out was hinted at being a female-female romance, lesbian romance, so I'm not sure if that's true or not, but this one here is the one they have so far out. So this is Crying Wolf. Now this guy's last name is Wolf. Now Elijah Wolf, he's an American. He grew up in America, like around the Nevada area, and so he ended up working, he was like a child laborer, and ended up striking gold to where now he's like independently wealthy, Now he's what they would say new money back in the day, that stuff, so he's a self-made man. And he ends up going to Europe. And what's her name again? Rosalind. Rosalind ends up going in his room for something. I think there was something that was in there that she needed to get, or maybe like an animal or something similar like that, where she had to get in the room. So she ends up going in the room. He discovers her there, and they get discovered. So now they're kind of forced to marry. Now he was like instantly attracted to her. This, I'd say, had a little bit of insta-lust. So it's like them, learning to like connect their differences and kind of go from there. But it definitely was a lot of like insta-lust, and I don't remember what else was in the story. Yeah, like her father had like something to do with like society, and so she had to go and like try to hide from society. So it was very much like kind of like class difference and getting over the class differences, like him not feeling good enough because of like the way he grew up, and then her having like nobility but then having disgrace in the ton and all this different stuff. It was a little bit insta-lust for me, but I still enjoyed it. And also I will say, like him, he definitely had more of a modern speak sometimes, where I was like, that's more modern to me. That doesn't seem like it's more historically accurate. But you know what? Romance historicals are not historically accurate. There are things that end up getting embellished. So I was like, this is not that deep. I still enjoyed it. So I would say all of these books in the series so far I have enjoyed. Some I like a little bit more than others, but I still all enjoyed all of them. So if I were to go and, recommend you any of these books in the series, it would definitely be the Good Girl series, because I liked all of those books in the series, where with the Victorian Rebels series, I didn't like it as much. There's still like a few other books that I still need to read. that are from Kerrigan Byrne. Like I still need to read How to Love a Duke in 10 Days. I still need to read that one. I have All Scott and Bothered. I have this one here. And then I have The Devil in Her Bed. That's all of the, that is all of the Kerrigan Byrne ones I have. Once I'm done with that, I'm all caught up with her, like, books. She has 2 other books that are coming out, I think this year, or maybe the other one's next year, I'm not sure. But she has 2 other books from this series that are coming out, and then she's done with that series, as far as I know. And then, I don't know what she's doing. I know she's got a couple other books that are like, they're like mysteries. They're not, I wouldn't say they're romances. They might have sprinklings of romance in the stories, but they're not like a traditional romance. So I do want to get to at least 1 or 2 of her mysteries and see if they're any good or not. And then it looks like she's kind of like combining, like, she's like writing with like another author, because there's another book like that was like Nevermore Bookstore or something like that. Some people weren't really giving it good reviews, so I'm not sure if I want to read that or not. But I have no idea what her future is for this author, or, you know, anything like that. But I'd say, like, if you wanted to read anything in the Kerrigan Byrne series, then I would say the Good Girl series. If you like historicals, you know, you're not really into like something that's too dark, where, like I said, that other series is very dark. This is a lot more lighthearted, so I would definitely recommend that series better. So, but that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other, and I will see you all on the next video. All right, bye.